An environmental assessment has been prepared for the proposed Shivwits Plateau landscape restoration project. The project is located within the Grand Canyon-Parashant National Monument in Mojave County, Arizona.
The project area is about 80 miles south of St. George, north of the rim of the Grand Canyon. Not on the Grand Canyon National Park, but actually on the Grand Canyon-Parashant National Monument, which is north of Lake Mead. And so we're right up against the Mojave Desert to the west of the project area. On the Shivwits Plateau is more Colorado Plateau vegetation.
The proposed project is a combined effort among the Bureau of Land Management and the National Park Service.
So the proposed project is at 318,000 acres of planting area, and we're looking at treating approximately about 52,000 acres of that. Right now the preliminary EA is out for public comment, and so the members of the public can read that EA and see the details of and the maps and everything that's being proposed in there.
The reason for the project is to reduce vegetation and manage the area for habitat and livestock.
The landscape restoration project is one that we have been preparing for since about 2020, working to restore the landscape as vegetation has grown over the years and become more decadent or dying in some places, and other places growing into vegetation that we want to reinvigorate for wildlife purposes, also to help reduce fuels in the area, and to help create forage for livestock operations too.
Much of the area is covered with juniper, pine, sagebrush, and weeds.
So the Shivwits Plateau is on the southern end of the Colorado Plateau, so it includes ponderosa pine forest, pinyon and juniper forests and woodlands, savannas, which is actually pinyon and juniper and sagebrush areas, and actually some small grasslands, which is kind of unusual for this part of the world. The treatments encompass all of those different ecosystems, and the treatments change based on what each ecosystem needs.
The proposed treatments for this area include everything from prescribed burns to removal of invasive species.
So the ponderosa areas, for instance, need to have prescribed fire brought back in so that they can burn naturally eventually. In the pinyon and juniper areas, we have some areas that are very old and are solid stands, and those we wouldn't treat. But other areas, they just need to be thinned out a little bit. They're missing their grasses and their forbs, or things like wildflowers. And so we want to bring that back.
Much of the work would be done by manual labor.
On the ground, we're probably talking about teams going out for days to weeks, depending on where we are. The area that we're going to treat is broken up into what we call treatment units. So there's sort of sub areas, usually somewhere in the neighborhood of, maybe 500 to 1,500 acres.
Manual methods that could be used would be lop and scatter and mastication.
Lop and scatter is usually used on trees and large brush. And it's what it sounds like. You are literally taking clippers, chainsaws, whatever, and cutting off branches and then cutting the tree down, or partially cutting the tree down, depending on what it is you need to go for. Mastication is grinding something up, essentially. So it also includes mowing. So if you think of mowing a lawn with really tall grass, you end up with clippings all over the place. That's what we're doing. We're mowing it, so we're creating sort of a layer for seeds to do better in.
Mechanical treatments involve use of shredders, chippers, and large tractors designed to implement the cuts. Chemical treatments would be necessary to eradicate noxious and invasive species of plants, which could include an aerial application. An estimated 23,000 acres would be treated by prescribed burns focused on ponderosa pine and minion juniper.
And cutting it down and then burning it. So we create what's called a low-intensity fire. It kind of creeps along the ground. And in some areas where we're going to also use prescribed fire, we'll create little piles and just burn the piles instead.
The treatment and reseeding of a portion of the area is expected to improve wildlife habitat and reduce fuels.
They are able to react better when there's a flood, a fire, climate change, or none of the above. So there's a lot of choices sort of within the plants to be able to respond so that we still have everything out there, all those different kinds of woodlands and grasslands and sagebrush areas.
This project could take upwards of 10 years, according to the proposed treatment plans.
The experience has shown that we typically could get these done in about 10 years. If the circumstances change significantly in that area, then we would be required to write another environmental assessment.
Migratory birds are also protected during the treatment process, as well as large animal breeds.
We're also not doing our treatments during the mule deer hunt season, which is very popular out there. So we don't want to scare the mule deer away and make it harder for people to find what they wanted to shoot at. There are no native fish on the Shivwits Plateau, but the Arizona Game and Fish Department is very interested in huntable wildlife. So they partner with us on many different kinds of projects to help mule deer or turkey hunts, or even bighorn sheep hunts. From what we do know, the only threatened or endangered species out there is the California condor, and they just fly over. And we actually have part of our proposed action in the environmental assessment to avoid causing any harm to the condors.
The cost of the project is yet to be determined. However, it would be paid for by the BLM, NFS, and Arizona Game and Fish Departments and Arizona Conservation Districts.
Or by a number of partners, and even our livestock operators help pay for these projects as well.
Impacts to recreational activities in the area during the project would be minor while treatments are occurring.
Most of the roads will still be open, and for the small areas where we need to close a road, say like when we're actually burning right up against a road, we put out a press release. We would make certain our websites tell everyone what's going on, and we would also have signs.
Under the Antiquities Act, objects identified in the presidential proclamation that established the National Monument must be protected. While this area has been treated before, it was very minimal back in the 1960s. According to the project documents, if no action is taken on the land, the area could face a high severity of wildfire, leading to excessive loss of vegetation. Currently, livestock are permitted to graze and feed off the land in many areas.
But for the most part, the animals, wildlife and the livestock, are going to have more areas to move into.
The monument project also consulted with 18 tribes at the beginning of the NEPA process. They will continue to be informed if the project progresses. The public has until July 3rd to comment on the proposed treatment plan.
So after the public comment period is over, we'll take the public comments and address those, and also write a decision and make a final decision at that time and issue it out to the public. Roughly slated for sometime this summer.
If it's approved, treatment could start as early as this fall. In St. George, Melissa Anderson, Community Education News.